The stars looked cold and distant through the cracked viewport of the Liberty's edge. Captain Jake rubbed his tired eyes and checked the navigation display for the third time in 10 minutes. The numbers were the same. 3 more hours until they reached 442B mining station. Jake hated these supply runs. The work was boring, the pay was terrible, and the alien overseers treated humans like dirt. But it was the only job available for his kind. Humans were Class 7 species according to the Dominion Council. That meant they could do basic labor, nothing more. "Coffee's ready, Captain," said Danny Clark, walking onto the bridge with 2 steaming cups. Danny was Jake's first officer and best friend since their academy days on Earth. Back then, they had dreamed of exploring the galaxy and making first contact with new civilizations. Reality had crushed those dreams quickly. "Thanks," Jake said, taking the cup. The coffee was synthetic, like everything else they could afford. Real coffee was too expensive for humans. Only the higher species could buy luxury items. Amy looked up from her engineering console. "The hyperdrive is acting up again. We might need to drop out of warp for repairs." Jake sighed. "Can you keep it running until we reach the station?" "I think so, but we need real parts soon, not these cheap knockoffs." Everyone knew they couldn't get real parts. The Dominion made sure humans only had access to old, broken-down equipment. It was another way to keep them down. The Liberty's Edge was a perfect example. The ship was over 50 years old, built by humans before first contact with the Dominion, back when humanity still thought they might become equals among the stars. Now the ship barely held together, patched and repatched with whatever materials Amy could find. Jake stared out at the stars and wondered what his grandfather would think. The old man had been alive when humans first built starships and reached for the galaxy. He had died believing his grandson would sail between worlds as a free man. Instead, Jake hauled supplies to mining stations and kept his mouth shut when aliens gave orders. The communication system crackled to life. "Human vessel Liberty's Edge, this is station control. State your business." The voice belonged to Jake could tell by the harsh, guttural accent. The Empire served as the military arm of the Dominion Council. They were 7 feet tall, covered in dark scales, and had never met a problem they couldn't solve with violence. "This is Captain. We're carrying medical supplies and rations for the mining crews. Proceed to Docking Bay 7. Any deviation from assigned flight path will result in destruction." The line went dead. Danny shook his head, friendly as always. "Just be glad they let us dock," Amy said. "Last month they turned away 3 human ships for security reasons." Jake knew what that meant. Some human somewhere had said or done something the Dominion didn't like. So they punished all humans by cutting off their supplies. It was collective punishment, designed to make humans police themselves. The mining station grew larger on their screens. It was an ugly metal structure built into an asteroid. Thousands of humans worked there, digging out rare minerals that powered Dominion technology. The workers lived in cramped quarters, ate processed food, and never saw real sunlight. Jake's friend Lisa Parker worked at the station as a medical assistant. She had trained as a doctor on Earth, but humans weren't allowed to practice advanced medicine in Dominion space. She could bandage cuts and hand out pain pills. Anything more complex required an alien supervisor. The docking procedure took an hour. Security officers boarded the ship and searched every crate looking for contraband. They found nothing because there was nothing to find. Jake's crew had learned long ago not to take risks. "Unload your cargo in Bay 7, growled the lead officer. "Your permits allow a 6-hour stay, not 1 minute longer." Jake nodded and kept his expression neutral. Though was looking for an excuse to cause trouble. Any sign of disrespect or defiance would end badly for Jake and his crew. They spent 4 hours unloading boxes of medical supplies and food rations. The work was hard, and the station's artificial gravity was set too high for human comfort. But they finished without incident and prepared to leave. That's when Jake heard the shouting. A crowd had gathered near the main corridor. Jake could see guards pushing through a group of human workers. Someone was screaming. The universal translator in Jake's ear turned the alien words into cold, mechanical English. Theft of medical supplies is punishable by death under Dominion law. Jake's blood ran cold. He pushed through the crowd until he could see what was happening. 3 human workers knelt on the floor with their hands bound behind their backs. Soldiers stood over them with energy weapons drawn. One of the prisoners was Lisa Parker. "Please," Lisa was saying. "The children were sick. They needed antibiotics. I was going to replace them when the next shipment arrived." The commander stepped forward. His name patch read Gore. He was a career soldier who had spent decades keeping subject species in line. Unauthorized distribution of medical resources, violation of supply protocols, theft of Dominion property. Each charge came out like a death sentence. Jake wanted to step forward, wanted to explain that Lisa was a good person who only wanted to help sick children, but he knew what would happen. They would add his name to the list of criminals. Danny and Amy would die alongside him. So he stood in the crowd and watched as Gore raised his weapon. The energy beam lasted only a second. Lisa Parker fell forward and didn't move. The other 2 prisoners followed quickly. The crowd of human workers stood in shocked silence. "Let this be a lesson," Gore announced. "The Dominion's laws apply to all species. Theft will not be tolerated." The soldiers marched away. The crowd slowly dispersed. Station workers appeared with cleaning equipment to remove the bodies. Within an hour, it was as if nothing had happened. Jake walked back to his ship in a daze. Lisa had been his friend for 15 years. She had saved his life during a mining accident on Titan. She had been the best medic he had ever known. Now she was dead because she tried to help sick children. "Captain," Danny was waiting at the airlock. "We should go." Jake nodded silently. They launched from the station and jumped to hyperspace. The stars stretched into lines of light as they fled back toward Earth. But Jake couldn't forget what he had seen. Somewhere in his quarters was a small recording device. Standard equipment on all human ships, supposedly for maintenance logs. But Jake had been using it for something else. He had recorded Lisa's execution. The question now was what to do with it. Jake stared at the small recording device in his hands. 3 days had passed since he returned to Earth, but he still couldn't stop thinking about Lisa Parker's death. The device contained proof of what they had done, but showing it to anyone would be signing his own death warrant. Danny Clark found him sitting alone in the ship's mess hall. "You haven't eaten anything today, Jake." "Not hungry," Jake replied, sliding the device into his pocket. "This is about what happened at the station, isn't it?" Jake looked at his friend. Danny had been there too. He had seen Lisa die, but Danny didn't know about the recording. "We can't just pretend it didn't happen," Jake said finally. "What choice do we have? If we cause trouble, they'll come for us next." Jake knew Danny was right. That's how the system worked. Keep your head down, follow orders, and maybe you'll survive another day. But something inside him had changed when he watched Lisa fall. He couldn't go back to pretending everything was normal. The next morning, Jake made his decision. He took a transport pod to the underground levels of New Geneva City. Down here, away from Dominion surveillance, humans could speak more freely. Not completely free, but more than anywhere else. Helen Grant ran a small repair shop in the lower levels. Officially, she fixed broken equipment for human settlers. Unofficially, she was the leader of something called the Underground Human Coalition. Jake had heard whispers about the group for years but never believed they were real. The shop was cluttered with old machines and spare parts. Helen looked up when Jake entered. She was a woman in her 50s with gray hair and sharp eyes. Her hands were stained with grease from years of mechanical work. "Captain," she said, "I heard about what happened at station." Jake wasn't surprised, she knew. Bad news traveled fast among humans. "Lisa Parker was a good person," Jake said. "Yes, she was. She saved a lot of lives over the years." Helen wiped her hands on a cloth. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Jake pulled out the recording device. "I have proof of what they did." Helen's eyes widened. She quickly locked the shop door and activated a signal jamming device. "You recorded it?" "Every second." Helen took the device and plugged it into a secure computer. The execution played out on the screen in horrible detail. When it finished, Helen sat back in her chair. "This changes everything," she said. "With this recording, we can show humans across the galaxy what the Dominion really thinks of us." "How?" "The communication networks are all monitored." Helen smiled. "You'd be surprised what a few old mechanics can accomplish." Over the next week, Jake learned about the underground network that connected human settlements across 12 star systems. It was built using old mining equipment and hidden communication relays. The Dominion knew it existed but couldn't find it. The recording of Lisa's execution spread through the network like wildfire. On Mars, human workers walked off their jobs in protest. On the farming world of New Haven, settlers refused to deliver their crops to Dominion ships. On Europa Station, miners barricaded themselves in the tunnels. But the most important response came from New Haven itself. A farmer named Ben Taylor sent an urgent message through the network. He had made a discovery that shook Helen to her core. "They're poisoning us," Helen told Jake as they watched Ben's recorded message. "They have been adding chemicals to our food supplies, slow-acting compounds that reduce human fertility and shorten our." Jake felt sick. They were the commercial arm of the Dominion. They controlled all trade and resource distribution. If they were poisoning human food, it meant the genocide was already. Ben's daughter Kate appeared on the screen next. She was a biochemist who had analyzed the contamination in their food supplies. Her tests showed that the chemicals had been present for decades. The Dominion hadn't just been oppressing humans, they had been slowly killing them. "We need weapons," Jake said. "Ships, guns, anything we can use to fight back." "We have something better," Helen replied. "We have Mike Davis." Mike Davis was a name Jake recognized. Before first contact with the Dominion, Mike had been one of Earth's top aerospace engineers. He had designed some of humanity's first interstellar vessels. After the Dominion took control, Mike had disappeared. Most people assumed he was dead. Helen led Jake to an abandoned mining facility on the far side of the moon. The place looked empty from the outside, but hidden beneath the surface was a workshop that took Jake's breath away. Mike Davis, now in his 70s, was building weapons. "Been working on this for 20 years, Mike said, showing Jake through the facility. "Me and a few other old-timers. We've been reverse engineering every piece of alien technology we could get our hands on." The workshop contained modified mining lasers that could punch through ship hulls, improvised missile launchers built from cargo containers, and communication devices that could slip past Dominion jamming. It wasn't much compared to what the aliens had, but it was a start. "The problem is numbers," Mike explained. "We can build weapons, but we need trained people to use them, and we need ships." That problem solved itself 3 days later. Dr. Sandra Lee appeared on the underground network with news that changed everything. Sandra was a who had been captured during a research expedition 6 months earlier. Everyone assumed she was dead. But Sandra had escaped from a prison ship. More importantly, she had stolen classified information about Dominion military capabilities and internal politics. Her message was broadcast to every human settlement in the galaxy. "The Dominion isn't as strong as they want us to believe," Sandra said. "There are cracks in their empire. Several subject species are planning their own rebellions. They have been fighting a guerrilla war for 3 centuries. The uprising was only crushed last year. If we time this right, we won't be fighting alone. Jake felt something he hadn't experienced in years: hope. For the first time since first contact, humans had a chance to fight back. It would be dangerous. Most of them would probably die, but they would die as free people, not slaves. Helen called a meeting of all coalition cells across the galaxy. Representatives from dozens of worlds gathered in the underground facility. They came from mining colonies, farming settlements, and industrial stations. All of them had the same look in their eyes that Jake felt in his heart. They were ready to fight. The rebellion had begun. The alarm bells rang across New Detroit at exactly 600 hours. Steve Johnson dropped his welding torch and looked up from the factory floor. Around him, 300 human workers stopped what they were doing and stared at each other. This was it, the moment they had all been waiting for. Steve pulled a small communicator from his tool belt. "Phoenix, this is Hammer. The nest is secure." Across the galaxy, similar messages crackled through hidden networks. On Titan Station, miners seized control of the ore processing plants. On New Hawaii, farmers blocked the spaceports. On Europa Base, technicians shut down the power grid. The human rebellion had begun. Jake watched the reports come in from the bridge of Liberty's Edge. His old cargo ship was now the flagship of a small fleet of converted vessels. Mining ships, cargo haulers, and passenger transports had all been fitted with weapons built in Mike Davis's hidden workshops. "Captain, we're getting confirmation from 17 systems," reported Lieutenant Carol White. She was young, maybe 25, but she had a sharp mind for tactics. "The simultaneous strikes are working. The Dominion forces are confused and scattered." Jake nodded. The plan was simple but effective. Hit everywhere at once before the aliens could organize a response. It was Helen Grant's idea, and so far it was working perfectly. Danny Clark looked up from his station. "Jake, we're getting a priority message from the fleet." The main screen flickered to life. Prince Vex appeared, his feathered face serious. They looked like giant birds with sharp beaks and intelligent eyes. They had been fighting the Dominion for 300 years, longer than any other species. "Captain," Prince Vex said in accented English, "my people are honored to fight alongside yours. We have waited long for this day." "The honor is ours, Prince Vex. What's our target?" "There is a space station in the Void Sector. The Dominion calls it the Neural Crown. It is the source of their power over the subject species." Jake had never heard of the Neural Crown, but Dr. Sandra Lee had mentioned something about mind control in her intelligence reports. "What does it do?" "It broadcasts a signal that suppresses independent thought across the galaxy. Every species under Dominion rule has been affected. It makes beings passive, obedient, afraid to rebel." Carol White spoke up. "If that's true, why aren't humans affected?" Prince Vex made a sound that might have been laughter. "Your species is naturally resistant. Your minds are too chaotic, too emotional. The Dominion considered this a weakness. They were wrong." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The aliens had tried to control human minds and failed. That's why they had used cruder methods: violence, starvation, and poison. Humans were immune to their most powerful weapon. "Where is this station?" Jake asked. "Hidden in the Nebula of Sorrows. My scouts have found it, but the defenses are too strong for our ships alone. We need human creativity to break through." While they talked, the rebellion was spreading across the galaxy. Steve Johnson and his workers had captured the entire weapons factory on New Detroit. They were now building guns and explosives for the resistance. Amy had helped them convert the factory's industrial machines into weapon-making tools. On New Haven, Ben Taylor was broadcasting proof of the Dominion's poisoning program. Kate Taylor had found a way to neutralize the chemicals in the food supply. For the first time in decades, human children were being born healthy and strong. But the Dominion was not sitting idle. Reports came in of massive fleets moving toward human settlements. The aliens were preparing for total war. On the bridge of the Neural Crown Station, Overlord of the studied the rebellion reports. They were the true rulers of the Dominion, tall beings with crystalline skin and glowing eyes. They had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. "The humans are more dangerous than we calculated," said to his advisors. "They are immune to the neural crown, and they are inspiring other species to rebel." Supreme Marshal Wren of the Empire stood at attention. "Give me permission to destroy Earth, Overlord. End this rebellion before it spreads further." Considered the request. "Very well, mobilize the extermination fleet. Every human world will burn." Back on Jake's ship, Dr. Green was studying data from the Neural Crown Station. Was a scientist who specialized in alien technology. He had joined the rebellion after his research team was executed for asking too many questions. "Captain, I've made an incredible discovery," said. "The Neural Crown doesn't just control minds. It's been draining life energy from billions of beings to power Dominion technology. That's how they've maintained their advanced civilization for so long." Jake stared at the data. "They're parasites." "Exactly. And now that the truth is spreading, other species are starting to remember who they used to be before the mind control." Prince Vex's fleet joined Jake's ships at the edge of the Nebula of Sorrows. Together, they had 50 vessels of various sizes. It wasn't much compared to the Dominion's military might, but it was all they had. "The Neural Crown Station is massive," Prince Vex explained as they studied the tactical displays. "It has defensive shields that can stop our weapons, but there might be another way." Carol White pointed to the station's structure. "Look at these power conduits. If we could get a small team inside, they might be able to plant explosives at key points." Jake studied the plans. It was a suicide mission. The team would have to fight through hundreds of guards, plant bombs in a dozen locations, and somehow escape before the station exploded. The chances of survival were almost zero. "I need volunteers," Jake announced to his crew. Every hand on the bridge went up. Meanwhile, Earth's orbital defenses detected the approaching fleet. Helen Grant stood in the command center, watching the enemy ships appear on long-range sensors. There were hundreds of them, including massive dreadnoughts capable of cracking planets. "How long do we have?" she asked. 18 hours, replied the sensor operator. Helen activated the emergency broadcast system. Across Earth and the colonies, humans heard her voice calling them to their last stand. "This is it, people. They're coming to finish us. But we're not going down without a fight. Every ship, every weapon, every person who can hold a gun, we need you now." In space, Jake's small fleet approached the Neural Crown Station. The massive structure loomed before them, bristling with weapons and shields. It looked impossible to destroy. But humans had always been good at doing impossible things. "All ships, this is. Remember what we're fighting for. Remember Lisa Parker and all the others who died. Today, we break the chains that have held the galaxy for 10,000 years." The attack began. The first wave of missiles hit Jake's fleet before they could reach the Neural Crown Station. 2 mining ships exploded in balls of fire. A converted cargo hauler lost its engines and drifted helplessly into the nebula. "Evasive maneuvers," Jake shouted. "Carol, find us a way through those defenses." Lieutenant Carol White studied her tactical display. The Neural Crown Station was enormous, the size of a small moon. Its weapons systems could destroy 100 ships without effort, but Carol had noticed something in the defensive patterns. "Captain, they're using the same attack formations they've used for centuries. Their tactics never change." Jake understood immediately. The Dominion had ruled for so long that they had become predictable. Their military doctrine was thousands of years old, designed to fight conventional battles against organized fleets. But humans didn't fight conventional battles. All ships break formation, random attack patterns, make it impossible for them to predict our moves. The human fleet scattered like leaves in the wind. Each ship took a different approach to the station. Mining vessels used their industrial cutting lasers to slice through shield generators. Cargo ships rammed into defensive platforms. Passenger transports dropped boarding parties onto the station's hull. Prince Vex watched the battle from his command ship. "Incredible," he whispered. "No commander would order such chaos, but it is working." The Dominion defenders were confused. Their computer systems couldn't track targets that moved randomly. Their weapons were designed to hit ships flying in straight lines, not vessels that zigzagged through space like drunken insects. Jake's ship reached the station's docking bay. "Amy, can you get us inside?" Engineer Amy had been working on the station's electronic systems. "I've got a temporary override on the bay doors, but we only have a few minutes before they lock us out." Captain Tony Lewis led the assault team into the station. Tony was a former military officer who had joined the rebellion after watching his unit get wiped out protecting a Dominion supply convoy. His team included demolitions expert Lisa Martinez and 12 other volunteers. The inside of the Neural Crown station was like a nightmare. The walls pulsed with organic material that looked alive. Strange lights flickered along corridors that seemed to go on forever, and everywhere there was a humming sound that made their teeth ache. "This place gives me the creeps," muttered Lisa Martinez as she set charges on a power conduit. "Focus on the mission," Tony replied. "We have 6 more locations to hit." Back on Earth, Helen Grant watched the extermination fleet approach. The enemy had 500 warships, including massive dreadnoughts that could crack planets. Earth's defenses included 30 human vessels and whatever weapons the underground had managed to build. "It's not enough," said Danny Clark. He had volunteered to help coordinate Earth's defense. "We need more time." "Time is what we don't have," Helen replied. "But maybe we don't need to win. Maybe we just need to survive long enough for Jake's mission to succeed." The first human ship to engage the fleet was a converted mining vessel called the Iron Will. Captain Rick had filled his cargo holds with explosives and aimed his ship at the largest enemy dreadnought. "This is for Lisa Parker," Rick said over the radio, then cut off communication. The Iron Will smashed into the ship's hull. The explosion tore a hole in the dreadnought's side and sent it spinning out of control. One enemy ship destroyed, but the cost was Rick's life and his entire crew. Nancy Davis piloted a small cargo hauler through the enemy formation. She couldn't hurt the big ships, but she could cause confusion. Her ship darted between the vessels, jamming their communications and dropping homemade mines in their path. "Come on, you ugly lizards," Nancy shouted over her radio. "Try to catch me." 3 fighters broke formation to chase her. Nancy led them on a wild chase through Earth's asteroid belt, using her knowledge of the local space to outmaneuver the more powerful enemy ships. Inside the Neural Crown station, Tony Lewis's team was running out of time. They had planted explosives at 5 of their 6 targets, but security forces were closing in. Laser fire echoed through the corridors as the humans fought their way to the final objective. "Jeff, can you override the security systems?" Tony asked. Jeff Brown was the team's computer specialist. He was young, maybe 20, but he understood alien technology better than anyone. "Give me 2 minutes," he said, connecting his equipment to a control panel. Soldiers rounded the corner, firing energy weapons. Lisa Martinez threw a grenade that sent them diving for cover. "Jeff, we don't have 2 minutes." "Almost got it," Jeff said, sweat running down his face. "There, security is down for the next 10 minutes. They reached the final target, the station's main power core. The room was enormous, filled with machinery that hummed with dangerous energy. This was the heart of the Neural Crown, the source of its mind control power. Lisa Martinez began setting the largest explosive charge they had. This should bring down the whole station. An alarm began blaring. Reinforcements were on their way. Tony looked at his team. Half of them were wounded. They were outnumbered 100-1. Jeff, can you give us a way out? Jeff Brown studied his portable computer. There's an escape pod bay 2 levels down, but someone needs to stay here and manually trigger the explosives. The timer won't work with all this interference. Everyone understood what that meant. Whoever stayed would die when the station exploded. Jeff stepped forward. I'll do it. No, Tony said. I'm the team leader. It's my job. With respect, Captain, you're needed to lead the survivors out. I'm just a computer guy. This is what I'm good at. Before anyone could argue, Jeff activated the manual detonator. Go. You have 5 minutes before this whole place blows up. Tony wanted to argue, but he knew Jeff was right. It's been an honor serving with you. Jeff smiled. Tell my mom I did something that mattered. The team ran for the escape pods as soldiers poured into the power core room. Jeff Brown faced them alone, his finger on the detonator button. In space, Jake's fleet was taking heavy casualties, but they had done their job. The assault team was inside the station, and the explosives were set. On Earth, the human defenders were fighting with desperate courage. Civilian ships rammed into enemy vessels. Mining lasers cut through alien armor. Factory workers fired homemade rockets at fighters. Dr. Sandra Lee stood in Earth's communication center, preparing to broadcast a message to the entire galaxy. If Jake's mission succeeded, if the neural crown was destroyed, every thinking being in the galaxy would hear the truth about the Dominion. Are you ready? Helen Grant asked. Sandra nodded. The moment that station explodes, I'll tell everyone what the Dominion has been doing to them. Inside the neural crown station, Jeff Brown faced a dozen soldiers. They raised their weapons, ready to kill him before he could trigger the explosives. Jeff smiled and pressed the button. The neural crown station exploded like a dying star. The blast could be seen from 100 light-years away. And as the station died, its mind control signal went silent for the first time in 10,000 years. Across the galaxy, billions of beings suddenly remembered who they used to be. The silence lasted for exactly 3 seconds. Then the galaxy exploded into chaos. On the battleship Dominator, soldiers suddenly stopped obeying orders. For the first time in their lives, they could think for themselves. Some threw down their weapons. Others turned on their officers. The ship's bridge erupted in fighting as centuries of suppressed anger finally broke free. Supreme Marshal Wren watched his fleet fall apart in real time. Ship after ship went dark as mutinies spread through the ranks. His own bridge crew was staring at him with hatred in their eyes. You made us slaves, growled his second-in-command. You made us kill innocent people. Wren reached for his weapon, but it was too late. His own soldiers overwhelmed him. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. On trade ships, crews realized they had been poisoning entire species for profit. On worlds, citizens discovered their leaders had been draining life from billions of beings. The revelation was too much for many to bear. Dr. Sandra Lee's voice echoed through every communication system in known space. Her message was simple but devastating. Citizens of the galaxy, you have been living under mind control for 10,000 years. The Dominion Council has been using you as slaves and food sources. You are now free to choose your own destiny. On Earth, Helen Grant watched the fleet disintegrate. Enemy ships were firing on each other or drifting powerless through space. The extermination fleet that had come to destroy humanity was destroying itself. My God, whispered Danny Clark, it's working. Captain Tony Lewis and the surviving members of his assault team floated in an escape pod near the remains of the Neural Crown Station. They had lost 6 people, including Jeff Brown, but their sacrifice had freed the galaxy. Jeff did it, Lisa Martinez said, tears in her eyes. That crazy kid actually did it. Jake's battered fleet moved through the wreckage, searching for survivors. His ship had taken heavy damage, but Amy kept the engines running with spare parts and determination. "Captain, we're getting messages from all over the galaxy," reported Carol White. "Slave worlds are declaring independence. Subject species are forming their own governments. The Dominion is collapsing." Lady stood before the High Council. She was young for only 800 years old, but she remembered stories from before the Dominion. Stories of when her people were explorers and teachers, not conquerors. "The humans have shown us what we truly are," she said to the assembled counselors. "We have become parasites, feeding on the life force of innocent beings. This must end." Overlord, ancient ruler of the, could barely comprehend what was happening. "We have ruled for 10. We brought order to chaos. We civilized the galaxy." "No," replied. "We enslaved it, and now it is time to make amends." The old order crumbled in a matter of days. Some Dominion loyalists tried to maintain control through force, but they were vastly outnumbered by newly awakened populations. Species that had been enemies for centuries suddenly remembered they had been friends before the mind control began. Prince Vex of the sent a message to Jake. "Captain, my people have voted. We want to join your Galactic Liberation Council. We have fought alone for too long." The Liberation Council had been Helen Grant's idea. Instead of replacing the Dominion with another empire, they would create a voluntary alliance of free worlds. Each species would govern itself, but they would work together on common problems. 6 months after the destruction of the Neural Crown, Jake stood on the bridge of a new ship. There was humanity's first purpose-built warship, constructed with help from former Dominion engineers who had joined the rebellion. But Jake hoped it would never need to fire its weapons in anger. "Admiral," said his communications officer. She was a young name who had volunteered to serve alongside humans. "We're approaching the system." Jake nodded. They were returning to the mining station where Lisa Parker had died. The station was now run by its workers, and they had built a memorial to the victims of Dominion oppression. The ceremony was simple but moving. Representatives from 40 different species gathered to remember those who had died fighting for freedom. Jake placed a wreath at the memorial wall where Lisa's name was carved alongside thousands of others. "They died so we could live free," Jake said to the assembled crowd. "We must never forget that freedom requires courage, and courage requires sacrifice." On Earth, children played in parks that had once been refugee camps. Among them was Emma Clark, Danny's daughter, who was playing with a young girl named Na. The two children couldn't speak each other's language very well, but they didn't need words to be friends. Helen Grant watched them from a nearby bench. The sight filled her with hope. These children would grow up in a galaxy where species worked together instead of oppressing each other. They would explore the stars as equals, not as masters and slaves. Dr. Green had established a research station in the ruins of the Neural Crown. His team was studying the wreckage to ensure that such a device could never be built again. They had also made an amazing discovery. The station wasn't just controlling minds, explained to Jake during a video call. It was suppressing the natural evolution of intelligence across the galaxy. Now that it's gone, we're seeing rapid advances in science and culture on dozens of worlds. Mike Davis, the old engineer who had built the rebellion's first weapons, was now helping former slave worlds develop their own technology. His workshops were training a new generation of engineers and scientists who would build a better future. On New Haven, Ben and Kate Taylor had solved the food poisoning problem. The chemicals were being removed from the food supply, and human birth rates were returning to normal. Kate had also developed treatments for the damage already done, helping thousands of people recover their health. The Dominion was officially dissolved 1 year after the Neural Crown's destruction. In its place, the Galactic Liberation Council established principles of cooperation, voluntary association, and mutual respect. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Jake stood in his quarters aboard looking out at the stars. They no longer seemed cold and distant. They were full of possibilities, full of worlds where beings could live free and pursue their dreams. A message arrived from Earth. It was from Danny Clark, who had decided to stay home and help rebuild human civilization. Jake, thought you'd want to know. Emma asked me today what you do out there among the stars. I told her you help people who are in trouble. She said that sounds like the best job in the galaxy. Jake smiled. Danny was right. It was the best job in the galaxy. The stars had once been ruled by oppression and fear. Now they belonged to hope and friendship. And somewhere among those stars, the children of 100 worlds were learning that the universe was big enough for everyone to find their place. The pattern was broken. The galaxy was free.